BrightLocal has released a new report analyzing 15 years of consumer behavior. In part two of this podcast, we interview Sammy Paget, head of research at BrightLocal, to discuss how reviews have changed over time and shifts in how people research and buy from local businesses.
I mean, we could probably devote a podcast to mistakes people are making with review solicitation, review management. I mean, one of the things that has often been debated is about whether review responses elevate rankings. Responding to particular reviews, does Google take that into account, or does Google see that as in a favorable way? I think the Michael in GMB API folks had a blog post that they were contending that companies that did respond more regularly were seeing some ranking benefit. I don't remember if I'm representing that correctly. Forgive me, Michael, if you're listening to this, if I got that wrong. Review responses, people want them. What have you guys seen about that, consumer attitudes toward them?
Yeah, so whether or not they, do influence rankings, the sentiment from consumers is that they really want to see it and they expect to see it for all types of review, which I think is really interesting because
Positive and negative.
yeah, we don't have any follow-up data to show whether these people are reading the responses they're getting. But I think the numbers we had were 89% of consumers said that they would be likely to use a business that they can see responds to all types of feedback versus about 42 or 44% who said that they'd use a business that doesn't respond to any reviews. So they want it, whether it impacts rankings or not. But it comes back to, I guess, the broader sense of reputation management. If you can be seen to be responding, listening, acting on feedback, it will only boost your reputation in the sort of minds of consumers. And that's one of the most important things, I think, to keep in mind.
Well, if you look at a lot of reviews, the criticism is of service. Very often, depends on the category. Very often people say, this person didn't respond to me. I called, they didn't respond. I submitted the information, they never got back to me, or they showed up late, or whatever. They ghosted me. Those kinds of comments are very common. And so this makes sense. People want to see that the business is responding in a professional and timely way, maybe irrespective of the content of the response. Here's somebody who's paying attention and who can be trusted to get back to me. It's a kind of a proxy for service in a certain way.
Yeah, it's almost like a sort of ego element to it as well, isn't it? You want to feel that and I find this a lot with Google Local Guides specifically, you want to feel that people are seeing your opinion and reading it and valuing it. And maybe there's a slight sense of that. But I think everything we write about, it always tends to come back to just deliver the best service you can as a business. And no matter what industry you're in, people will go out of their way to, write about you if you are giving the best service possible, the best experience.
Right, which is the oldest advice in the world.
Well, the corollary to that is suck less so you get fewer really bad reviews also, because again, it skews that way. In terms of Michael's research, I would say the correlation is definitely not causation in this case, that review responses do not directly lead to ranking improvement. I think it's what Sammy pointed out, that it reflects engagement on the part of the business owner. Consumers see that engagement, they might read more reviews. If my theory is correct, then the review
It's an engagement signal.
It's an engagement signal because people are then spending time there and Google sees the time. But if that's the case, then review responses have to be thorough, creative, funny, interesting, compassionate, empathetic, and so that they are readable, right? So you don't fall into this idea that I can just put any response out and get a ranking increase. It's not the case.
I want to talk about this in a second, and we've already talked about it to a degree, about the sort of AI review response. A lot of the big review platforms now have incorporated some AI capabilities in different ways. And one of the common ones is, especially for franchises or multi-location businesses, we're going to generate review responses, which are difficult to do at any kind of scale. And the degree to which people sort of are lulled into a false sense of security or confidence, there may be like, here's a kind of quasi-perfunctory thing that I'm going to personalize a little bit, or just publish as is if the AI response is good enough. And that probably doesn't do what Mike is describing, which is create engaging content that people will then in turn spend time on, scroll over, click on, or whatever, signals Google is sort of ingesting and that may be what caused Michael's findings. That sounds like a very plausible theory to me. But sort of on this best practice issue, kind of the final question, I think, is there anything in the data that shows common mistakes that businesses are making? Anything that points out something that people aren't doing or are doing that is problematic?
Yeah, I think the first most obvious one is not responding to their reviews. But then we asked a new question this year in terms of what stops people writing reviews for businesses. One was again that experiences just aren't noteworthy enough. So there's a mistake there, I suppose, in that people are letting that fall down. But the other one comes back to making it easy for people to do it. I think you can ask someone to do it and they might want to, but then they might have to go away and do that themselves, and they have to look them up on Google or TripAdvisor. Whereas if you can follow up with a succinct email that has various links in it, or a QR code or something that just takes someone directly to it, that just makes that journey so much easier for people.
That makes sense. Mike, anything to add to that? About
I
major
have
mistakes?
often wondered, though, making it easy makes it also easier for Google to track that it was a review request. And I've been curious to know if just generating a link that is a brand query that takes you to the rough location, whether that might have more value in terms of broader SEO implications or not. Just a curiosity. I mean, I've never tested this theory.
Meaning people sort of that registers that as a brand query, and the
Right.
engagement, whatever clicking then gives them a signal.
Right. So it would generate brand queries engagement that might help SEO more than a direct link, which to the actual review box. It's very easy for people to do, whether putting some friction in the system. Yeah, this is just,
You're saying the homepage, the main URL versus the precise.
yes, right. And whether or not that would offer any benefit. So I'm looking for somebody to test that theory. If you're doing a lot of review requests, have two locations, want to turn one to the homepage at your page on Google versus your review link, and see if that changes.
You could just have you could just have an email that explicitly said, if you visit this link a couple of times, click a couple of times, do a search that includes this keyword phrase. We'll
I
thank you.
wasn't looking to go that far, but
We'll
yeah, I
thank you
suppose you
for it.
could.
All right, let's talk about the future of reviews, because I think that this is a really interesting time. We talked about the decline in review trust. We talked about people sort of diversifying their review sources and adapting to the possible presence of fake reviews by looking at multiple places. And now what we're seeing a lot of is the introduction of AI-generated review summaries. That's happening on certain retailer sites, certainly on Amazon. Amazon's doing a lot of work in that area, and Google has sort of done some of that. They're showing some review summaries, I believe, on the GBP page, the knowledge panel, and also the ask maps about this place is a kind of a version of that, because you can ask natural language questions and reviews are part of the input into that. How do you see the relationship between the sort of emerging aggregation of review content in the form of summaries, whether it's shown up as some score or buttons or some set of aggregated text, and reviews going forward, right? What we've talked about is only a minority are really spending the time to look carefully at the review text. It seems to me, let me just throw out this thesis, I'm talking too long, but it seems to me that people will rely less and less on reviews over time, that the laziness will get them to look at the summaries, and then the reviews just become a sort of form of data in the background. Do you agree or disagree with that, based on your own sort of sense of things?
Yeah, I mean the sort of content marketer in me wants to disagree with that, I suppose, in the sense that I suppose humans are still curious. There will always be elements of reviews that we will spend time looking at, photos, for example. But yeah, the fact that platforms like Google are pulling out those kind of justifications, and we are consuming those without even considering that AI has done it, does sort of show that it's going to be much, much more common. But I think that's a good use case for it, at least.
The things that I've done is I've gone to ChatGPT. I've done this with Amazon as well, and I've asked, tell me the things that people have said in reviews about this business that are positive. Tell me what the main criticisms of this business have been. Just going straight for the information that I'm interested in, and that often works. I mean, you can ask on Amazon. You can ask about products. What is the primary criticism that the negative reviews say, and it'll tell you those things. And that's enormously useful and a time-saving tool. I don't have to read the reviews. I mean, one of the challenges is there's so many reviews in certain categories that it's just real. I mean, this is where recency comes in. People don't want to scroll too deep. They look at the most recent stuff, or they filter by get more efficiently into the content. So, I mean, Mike, do you disagree with the idea that the review text will decline in importance other than as a data input over time?
I think Google is speaking to their audience and it's audience dependent. Right now, we're seeing in certain categories as few as 20%. For those people, those review summaries are going to be incredibly important. For those in other categories where we're seeing 50%, they're more likely to continue looking at the reviews because it's dependent upon the purchase and the
Right.
perception of how difficult or complicated this is going to be.
Totally agree. I mean, I think the
So,
doctors
but
versus
Google. One thought about this, though, is that Google is currently now training people to use AI the way you said you're using it on Amazon with the Ask Map about this place, for example, where you can actually, if they've got 1,000 queries or 1,000 reviews, you can now ask Google to do the summary the way you want to understand it of the reviews, and it will actually do it for you. So I think part of that is also training people into these new tools so that you can guide their behavior away from the ones that are actually reading the reviews to a more likely, easier to do summary of the reviews that speaks to your specific needs. So I see it changing over time, I guess.
do you think that as we see sort of this trust pattern, the decline of trust, it may have bottomed out, it won't necessarily continue to go down. Do you see a increasing reliance on editorial content? I mean, this is sort of I can tell you anecdotally in my own behavior, I'm much more reliant now on word of mouth than I used to be. I used to go quickly to Google or wherever, do lookups, trust the reviews, call the three businesses, or make my purchase decision. And now I feel like I'm asking people for recommendations more. Just anecdotally, it feels like that. Hey, do you know somebody do you have a tradesman, handyman who can do this, or a painter or whatever? And I'm trying to short circuit the inefficiency of wading through a lot of reviews. And so editorial content is one place to go. New York Times has a publication or a sort of a unit called the Wirecutter, which used to be an independent business. You may be familiar with it. It's a product review site.
Mm.
And I just go there and see if they have a recommendation. And in 5 out of 10 cases or 6 out of 10, I'll buy their recommended thing. So I don't do any of the research. I don't do any of the review reading. I just go to that site for that product category and then I'll go buy it. And so this is sort of, to me, this is indicative, and plus your local news point is indicative of the rise of alternative sources for people who are looking for the same kinds of information that they would get through reviews, but now just doing it in either a more efficient way or a more trusted way. Do you see that trend continuing?
Yeah, I wonder as well if it kind of depends on the intent of what you're looking for or how close you are to, purchasing something. I think one question we asked this year was around video content and just whether people are kind of consuming video review content and who they're consuming it from. And one surprising thing we found was that a lot of consumers are, as the top answer, directly going to businesses, which suggests in that sense that they already have a pretty good idea that they want to buy something from that business in particular and that they're going straight to them. Again, like anecdotally for me, I think if I'm making decisions around things like hospitality locally, I will read editorial content, but it's kind of produced by like hyper local kind of publications, like really specific to the sort of small town or city that we live in. So I do feel like there are kind of maybe different use cases for different industries, but also in terms of the levels of intent there as well.
So just a related question, and then Mike has a couple of questions, I know, and we should wrap up. Um, reviews in a way stand in for or indicate or signals for other things, right? Quality, service, value, and reviews capture and reflect that back, as we have discussed already, to the consumer. One of the things that was true in kind of the early period of directories, review-based directories, where people didn't have a lot of user-generated content, there weren't a lot of people writing reviews. So what they were trying to do in a number of cases was find other data sources and create a score, some sort of ranking system based on other indicators of quality or reliability or whatever. And Google did that to a degree with their Google Screen and Google Google. What's the other one, Mike? Google Screen and Google. Oh,
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed, right? Yes, that's of course. So, business license and being in good standing here and there, and these were sort of proxies for other things that might indicate the business was reliable and did a good job. Do you see, so in the notes that I sent over, Amazon has this very interesting badge that they put on products that are returned more than other similar products in the category. And I found that to be really fascinating and useful as a consumer. It's like the kiss of death as a merchant, I think. But do you see, I mean, in the category of alternative information sources, do you think that it's now with AI possible to potentially cobble together something that would be an alternative to reviews? And Mike, equally, this question is to you. No? Maybe? I obviously
Yeah,
think the answer is yes.
I think that Google's Ask Maps about this business does it, but it relies on data,
Well,
right?
reviews are one input
Amazon,
into that.
right. Amazon has the data in terms of the returns. Google has data in terms of, say, visits to a location, but they don't have quality indicators like returns. And so
Well, they do. They do. If they really are tracking individual phones, they know if somebody's been to
and they do
this.
track credit cards as well. So
Right.
they could theoretically merge that data. I don't think they have been. I'm not totally confident about that, but I think their play is to make AI front and center as a interface to reviews would be my response to that. That you can get the information you're looking for with a simple query, but I don't know. What do you think, Sammy?
yeah, it feels like that is the most useful thing that it could be, and also requires less effort on the consumer's part. Otherwise, creating some sort of alternative, whether it's an index or a new directory, is just another thing for someone to have to do, isn't it? So the idea instead that AI, creating these kind of badges or these justifications around returning things less, that seems like a really great use case for it.
One of the things that is most consumers like about AI is the sort of personalization dimension of it, meaning you can create all kinds. I mean, you can personalize search in the sense that you put in a query in a search box and you get a personalized answer, which maybe have additional personalization features with over sort of interface, or with an AI site like ChatGPT. You can truly ask whatever question you want about whatever aspect of the business, and if there's data beneath that, it'll provide an answer, and that offers something that I think people really like and are really responding to, and I think it will result in a chat overlay on most of the data that exists on the internet at some point eventually.
So
Yeah.
I just ran this test. I was using the Learn Something Specific feature, which is mobile search equivalent of Ask Maps about this business. It's an AI summary. And I just ran it on Barbara Oliver, who I know has very few bad reviews. And
Which is a jewelry store that you've done a lot of work
jewelry
for
store that
over
I'm
the
right.
years.
And I said, are there any bad reviews about her and her business, whatever? And it said, there's not much. However, some say they've received excellent service. So it doesn't get better than that. But the first URL reference was her website, where she uses a review platform to inject her reviews onto her site, and which speaks to this additional use of reviews for marketing, which we really haven't covered as a best practice, but which I think it is, which is putting your reviews every place, right? Because her site's the first one that comes up in the AI response. And I think that, and Yelp is second. Just an interesting test related to what we were talking about. That's all.
I think what's unfortunate about this example that you've just given, Mike, or discussion that you've just given, is that you're going to now be forced to write an article on it. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in this conversation that's worthy of discussion that isn't conventionally discussed around reviews as a marketing tool, as a way to generate engagement, review responses as a signal to Google, reading review responses, engaging with review responses. There's a lot of sort of secondary things here that are interesting that we could explore. And eventually, Mike, I'd hope you write about.
If I'm so moved, or you give me an outline, either or.
Well, in fact give you an outline. You give me the
All right.
transcript of this, I will put it
I'll
into
give it back to
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT and see what I can do with it.
That's exactly right. That's how we generate content now. So let's move into sort of the final thing here. Mike, you had a couple of, and Sammy, of course, any comments that you want to make that you didn't get a chance to make?
Sure. So Google had a big trust report that came out. They sort of have taken on the Yelp thing where we're now taking down enough reviews we can brag about it kind of approach to their marketing. They had nearly 1 billion reviews that they accepted, almost 250 million reviews that they suppressed, and they announced a badge of shame if they perceive a business to be manipulating reviews. That badge will be on their uh, mobile profile, review profile, but it won't show, for example, in search. So I'm curious if one, what your take is on Google's claim to have taken down 250 million reviews. How many of those you think are real reviews that their AI just took down in a surface, in extra enthusiasm?
Yeah,
And
they said 15% were fake reviews of the term policy violating reviews that were taken down.
oh, really? So clearly they're admitting that 10% are taken down for other reasons. We don't know what those are. So one, do you think that I see Google as having created the lack of trust in reviews. Do you see these types of efforts as increasing user trust in reviews? I mean, Google basically has destroyed the environment which they helped create. Do you think that'll help? And the second thing is, do you think the badge of shame, given that it's buried currently, will have much impact on user behavior?
Or is
Yeah,
it review trust theater that they're doing?
I mean, 15% seems like a really big number to say 15% of all reviews submitted were fake.
That's my recollection.
Yeah, I don't know. One thing I would say is that I don't know how aware consumers are of that sort of effort by Google. Obviously, we're much more aware of that. We see it in kind of digital marketing headlines a lot. Like, it's something that the platforms are really cracking down on. But whether or not that actually impacts the everyday consumer, I suppose I don't really know. But I know that I've got friends who are small business owners that have been really frustrated because they're having reviews removed, that they said, these are genuine clients of mine. I know they're my clients, and they're leaving
Yeah.
reviews and they're disappearing. So it does feel like it's creating a bit more of a problem in that way.
Well,
And what do you think about the badge of shame? Just before you go, Greg, do you
I've
think it'll have
never
any
seen
impact?
one in the wild.
We actually published one from the UK last fall, October, on Near Media. You can find one on our website,
Yeah.
but
there's another
you'll be
link.
seeing them more.
There's another link for show notes.
I like
Yes.
the idea of them as long as they're accurate, I guess. But yeah, I've never seen one, so I will be
Well,
curious to see what they look like.
it's a very damning. I mean, Yelp does it with greater frequency, but it's a very damning thing to encounter from a consumer standpoint. And I think that should not be applied unless the Google is very confident that it should be applied.
Confidence. Google is always very confident, but they're also, as a matter of policy, willing to accept 10, 15% errors in their AI. And so, yes, they're confident that their AI is as good as it gets, but it still is only 85 or 90% accurate. So you're going to see a 15% error rate. I would contend that this badge of shame does no good buried on where it is. It
No,
would
right.
only function if it were shown on the main page of search, but then you really run the chance of ruining a business inadvertently. And I think
Yeah.
that would
And
be,
does Google have the
worse.
right to do that?
Right, right. The
Well,
other, I don't know if you know this, but Google just announced privately through emails that all schools worldwide, primary and secondary, are no longer going to be able to get reviews. It's policy reflected currently in the United States, and that they will be removing reviews from all schools. This is what the email said. So this is sort of breaking review news. You heard it here first. I'm just curious if you have an opinion about that and what you've seen with schools, the policy as it
Seems
stands.
such a strange thing to review, doesn't it? And I don't have any data on this, but I can imagine that most of the reviews would be really disgruntled individuals rather than, this is a great school, go here.
Or prankster sophomores.
Yes. Yeah, there was that rise recently with the high schools, wasn't there?
Yeah, the Hawk Tuo reviews.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like, in a way, there should be certain things that maybe are protected from just anyone being able to review them, and maybe sort of educational institutions are one of them.
so just on the growth of fake reviews, in terms of Google's transparency, Maps Trust Content and Safety Report, they said that in 2023 they removed or blocked 170 million policy violating reviews, which was over 45% more than in 2022. And then this past year, in the most recent report, they said the total number of reviews was removed was 246, I guess, million, 245, 246 million, which was an equivalent growth rate of about 44% over the previous year. So what that says is two things. Google's getting more aggressive in removing reviews, and there are more fake or problematic reviews being published or being
And more
submitted.
good reviews are being removed.
Well, and then that's also undoubtedly part of it. As Google tries to restore trust with more aggressive. I mean, I think the DSA in Europe is playing in the background here also, which is an anti-fraud content moderation regulation, among other things. And that has, together with other things like the declining trust in the United States, has caused Google to get more aggressive about trying to police reviews. And so they are, it's like going after a tuna and catching the dolphins. They're casting too wide a net. And that's as Brad Weatherall in one of our discussions talked about. That's collateral damage in their sort of calibrating their.
Sammy, I would make another research request of you, as long as I'm putting things on your plate. And that would be our research of responses in the forums when complaints about review takedowns peaked after in 2022 were going way up, review takedowns. And a lot of people are complaining about good reviews missing. My analysis showed that it was predominantly in home and professional services and more frequent in newer businesses and more frequent in businesses that had remote clients. And I would love to see your research, a research in your area that asks this question of businesses, have you had good reviews gone missing, and and map that to category to see, because I believe that Google, in gaining this big number, has targeted new businesses and businesses in distressed categories that are less visible to consumers. So they're able to take down big numbers without getting a lot of consumer complaints, I guess is the way I would put it. But I'd be curious to see that research again if you need more work.
which would be a very cynical approach, Mike. Are you accusing Google being cynical?
I am accusing them of being Google and not really caring about the environment in which they exist. And I think as a result, they've had a long-term deleterious effect on reviews. So that's what I'm accusing them of, being Google.
Yes, for sure. So, Sammy, as we wrap up, is there anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you wanted to, or any points you didn't get a chance to make?
Including your DNA.
Yeah.
Sharing my Northern European heritage with the world. I don't think so.
Or any conclusions that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think the main things to keep in mind really are just one, again, it always comes back to service. Like just be good. Just as you said earlier, Mike, just don't suck. It's the oldest business rule in the book, surely. But I think the other thing that I kept kind of coming back to in the historical trends analysis and the most recent report is just acknowledging that kind of shift in social awareness and how businesses should maybe see it as a good thing that consumers are interested in negative and positive feedback. They're still going to read it and they're still going to use it to make their decisions. They shouldn't rest on their laurels and think, oh, it's fine, we've got negative reviews, we don't need to do anything about that. But it's a nice message, at least, that they don't need to lose hope, because we are willing to take all sorts of feedback on board and make our own decision.
All right. Anything you want to add, Mike, before we go?
I just get so many, just what Sammy just said made me think of so many emails I get where business owners are literally in pain because they got one bad review or two bad reviews. And you go and you look at their account and they're 4.8 with 300 reviews. And you're thinking, oh my, the other thing I would add is it's a process. It's a 5-year process. And any one review, one way or the other, should just be a data point. And you need to look towards the 5-year view of your business, run an excellent business, and stop fretting about that one customer that you didn't make happy or that you think left you an unjustified review. The psychological pain I see is so great, so that I become literally a counselor as opposed to helping with review takedowns. It's like,
well, as the Buddhists say, attachment causes suffering. So you got to sort of detach.
Yes.
And sort of a final point, which is a point that you've made, Mike, and others certainly have made, is that you really need to look at reviews as an important source of feedback about your business that can have some really good suggestions and really valuable insights in them. Don't see them as a sort of a necessary evil for purposes of Google ranking. Use that information analyze that information, because it could really be quite valuable in many ways that many people don't expect. And that's
How they came about. That was the original point of them, right? Constructive feedback. Did we do good today? And, it's become something now that is
it's all about
just,
Google. It's all about Google.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. It really needs to be about the customer relationship and getting back to that, and not thinking solely about the role that the review plays in ranking on Google, which is how most people think about it.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, we will conclude this episode. Thank you very much, Sammy Paget, or Paget, to use the older pronunciation.
Thank you.
Fascinating discussion. Obviously, we'll continue to talk about reviews forever and ever, because they're so central to the customer experience online. But thank you for joining us today.
Aunt Tarjay or not?